Thank you, Bob. Let me right off 57 years. But thank you, Bob, for that generous introduction. Put me in mind of what Dizzy Dean said after he was given a great introduction. He said, when he got to the podium, he said, you know, the older I get, the greater I was. But I am Robert Josh. I am a native Cincinnatian. And I want to talk about family a little bit tonight, because the family is the incubator of liberty. And there's no way that we can restore genuine liberty in our country if we, in fact, don't restore the proper place for family in the culture of our nation. But I am from Cincinnati, and most of you probably have heard what Mark Twain said about Cincinnati after his 7th visit to the Queen City of the Midwest. A young journalist asked him what his impression was. And he said, son, if I heard the world was ending tomorrow, I would get to Cincinnati as fast as I could, because things happen there 7 years after they happen in the rest of the world. I graduated from Xavier. We played the Quantico Marines every year. In my junior year, a Marine sergeant playing across the line from me gave me a greater physical education than the Jesuits provided me in the classroom. And I prayed to God that he not be sent to Vietnam, so I might return the lesson in kind to him in my senior year. And let me tell you, God answers prayer. Delivered him unto me, sir. And I was putting a whooping on him, but I tackled a Marine fullback, not with my shoulder, with my head was knocked out. They sent me to Good Sam Hospital. They did x-rays came back negative. They sent me back to the game, 4 quarters. They put me back in the game. The next day, the Cincinnati Post gave me the most banner headline that I received in all of my political career. It read, Blackwell, head x-ray, show nothing. So I've fought most of my life trying to disprove that headline. The Michigan-Ohio State debate was an interesting one in my family. I had a great uncle. He was born in Cincinnati. But 101 years ago, he was the first Black American to win an Olympic gold medal in track and field. His name was D. Hart Hubbard. He won the gold medal in the long jump. But that year, he was scheduled to go to Paris and to run in the 100 and the high hurdles. He was scheduled to run in the 100 against Eric Little of Chariots of Fire fame. But when he got to Paris, he was told that the 100 was a white-only event. And so he didn't get to compete against Eric. They had a transatlantic debate as to which one of them was the fastest human being on the face of the earth. But he said God blessed him, Josh. He said God blessed him because he got to witness a guy who could have run to worldly glory, show fidelity to his faith, and chose not to run in the final because it fell on the Sabbath. I would just start out by telling you that what I've learned over my 77 years is faith untested cannot be trusted. Faith untested cannot be trusted. And that is what has been at the heart of my public service, and is at the heart of this nation, who next year would have been around as a constitutional republic for 250 years. My dad came back from World War II. There was a housing shortage, there was still vestiges of segregation. And so I grew up the early part of my life in the public housing community, which ironically I then became mayor of my city, and then Undersecretary of HUD with Jack Kemp, where we did housing policies all around the country, and we talked about enterprise zones and giving people a chance at home ownership. But I want to underscore something. My dad used to have us recite the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And so I remember that second paragraph: we hold these truths to be self-evident. And one day I asked my father, I said, what does that mean? He said, son, it means any knucklehead should be able to get this. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, which fundamentally means that our fundamental human rights are not grants from government, but gifts from God. There is not a government on the face of the earth that can give you your human rights, your fundamental rights. They're gifts from our Creator. Now, why that is so important as we approach the 250th year of our country's existence as a constitutional republic is because there are forces that are attempting to run God and faith out of the public square and convince you that government is king, not our God. That tears at the very heart of our constitutional republic. Aristotle said it, and that meant that I can say this, that I didn't go to sleep in every one of my Jesuit classes. Aristotle said that there's a dynamic tension between the organized power of the state and individual liberty. The more muscular, the more powerful the organized state, the less free we are to experience individual liberty. One of the blessings of our constitutional republic, as well as one of the challenges of our constitutional republic, is that governmentally it is decentralized, meaning there are only very limited powers that the central government in Washington should have. And what the quality of our constitutional life in our constitutional republic turns on is our ability to understand that the primary unit of governance beyond one's self is the family. Right. If you destroy the family, you destroy the fundamental foundation upon which this country is built on, second in its importance only to the fact that we recognize who gave us those fundamental rights and liberty. And so as we talk about a vision for Ohio, as has been articulated by Bob and Robert and Josh, and as we talked about it in our pledge to the flag and the singing, of our national anthem. We must, as we said in Ohio, in God we trust. But I just want to say something. History is not a snapshot. History is a process. We are at a hinge in history where what we do today, this year, and next year will have a fundamental impact, not just this week, next year, but for the next 100 years. And the choice is ours. We can choose to be engaged and influencers of history through the use of our human agency, which is a fundamental gift that God has given us. Or we can be made by history. We can be on the front lines, or we can retreat to the sidelines. We can make things happen, or we can sit around saying, what just happened? There are 3,100 counties in America. There are tens of thousands of precincts. What happens next election, and the election after that, and the most consequential election in a long time in 2026, will determine the next 100 years. I'll be pretty frank. If the Republicans lose the trifecta, the presidency, the House of Representatives, and the majority in the Senate, we're going to watch the next 250 years, starting next year, go down the drain. There is nothing more important in our constitutional republic than your individual engagement. That's why when Lynn called, I said yes. Because in 2006, I introduced the flat tax. And the establishment mobilized against it. But the reality is, it has a new life. But it will only become part of our landscape and our nation's history and Ohio's history if, in fact, we don't work hard to make sure that we have free and fair elections. And the only way that you can do that is through your individual engagement. I crisscross the country, and I tell people, it does all start with the family. My grandmother, my mom's mother, was a housekeeper for 4 families. My dad, like I told you, came back. He was a meat packer at a produce company. But I remember when my grandmother sent me off to college, and along with my family, she pulled me off from the table with my mom and dad, cousins and brother, and she said, son, you're going to go to Xavier University. And my friend Ida May cleans that library over there. She said, thousands of books. She said, but we will have not done our job if you are not familiar with 3 more important books than any of those thousands of books in that library. This comes back to our vision for Ohio. She said, first is your date book. The second is your checkbook. The most important is the good book. She said, your date book tells how you spend your time and with whom you spend it. Your checkbook, no matter how abundant or meager your resources, tells what you value. She said, but the most important book is the good book. It will, in fact, lead you down the path of conviction as opposed to the path of convenience. Ladies and gentlemen, as we craft the vision for Ohio, let's not lose our roots. In God we trust. I just tell you, we heard it, I don't have to repeat. Brother Spags said, if you're not in the room, you're not in the game. If in fact we don't have live eyeballs and brains in every precinct, believe me, they can still steal elections. Period. There's no more important message or outcome of our presentation today and our engagement and our conversations this evening than committing to do what you can with what you have where you are. And so I don't care. I will tell you, during the civil rights movement in the mid-60s, before I would go to football practice at Xavier, I would go down with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and Chattanooga, Tennessee. I couldn't even vote, but I could drive. That's what, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's just that you can make 3 calls from your home. If you have the energy in your legs and you have the willingness to engage, be a precinct worker. Because in 2004, here in Ohio, my cry out to the voters was that if in fact election results fell within the margin of litigation, we would get whooped in court because we were not prepared to fight back. And I watch it across the country. Within small margins of victory, elections can be decided through the smartest litigation strategy as opposed to the will of the voters. This last election in 2024, what I said to the Trump team, along with those of us who are working in election integrity, we said, here's our guarantee. You just better work to make the spread too big to rig. And I would suggest to you that while Robert is making sure internally and across the state as the Secretary of State and as LaRose is doing now, nothing is more important than your engagement as thinking and patriotic individuals. And so, my great uncle, D. R. Hubbard, he came back to Cincinnati. The only job he could get, yes, as a graduate from the University of Michigan, top 10% of his class, was as an associate in the recreation department. He took Naho baseball in to the central city in Cincinnati, and then across the state. He became one of the founders of the American Negro Baseball League. He was the founder and owner of the Cincinnati Tigers, or the old American Negro Baseball League. So I grew up, even in public housing, and once we got into market housing, I grew up with some of the old guys, like Satchel Paige. Now, I was getting ready to clean it up. I can clean it up a little bit. I learned so much from listening to the wisdom of those guys. And one of the things that strikes me as I crisscross the country, and really as I crisscross the globe, is that Satchel Paige said, it is damn difficult to steal second base if you want to keep one foot on first. Think about that. If you want to take second base in a steal, you have to be smart, but you have to make the break, but you have to take the risk. Psychologically, there is a phenomenon called homeostasis, which is equilibrium. Human beings don't like to be off balance. They like homeostasis, they like equilibrium. But sometimes you become so stable in a stale status quo. You remember what Reagan said? Status quo is Latin for the mess that we're in. You have to take the break. I can't build anymore on Bob's opening comments and the comments from my two colleagues here talking about this vision. But I'll tell you, Psalms 11 verse 3 raises the question. If the foundation be destroyed, what shall the righteous do? Put that in a secular frame of reference. If the foundation of our constitutional republic be attacked, be destroyed, what can citizens, freedom-loving citizens of this country do? You can get up off the bench. You can get in the game. You can engage. You can make a difference. I'll close with this. That grandmother of mine, she in fact bought me a book from one of the families that she worked for when I had the mumps. And I read this story about a little boy in an infirmary in the early 1900s. One night, the nurse came to his window and she said, "Little boy, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm looking at the man punch holes in the darkness." She said, "What?" He said, "I'm looking at the man punch holes in the darkness." So she went down the window, she looked out, it was dusk. And what the little boy saw was the lamplighter going down the street, lighting the lamps. And in his mind's eye, the man was punching holes in the darkness. John 3. Those who would do evil love the darkness. Ladies and gentlemen, as we in fact enact this vision, as we make it more than just words, don't spend a lot of time cursing the darkness. Light candles and punch holes in the darkness.